for those in attendance, if you have a cell phone, if you could make sure it's in a silenced mode, that'd very much be appreciated throughout the meeting. There are no changes to the agenda. I would, however, like to have some flexibility here to jump around a little bit. So I am suggesting that we start with item 6, the deputations, followed by the motion from Councillor Height concerning tenant water arrears. Then I would like to go to item number 11, which the Meisner Dam staff report is on page 77. And then I would like to jump back to do the approval of the minutes, particularly because last week's CIC minutes are in there, and we'll be looking at the situation on Holden Ave, and that should deal with a lot of why we have a number of people in the audience this evening. So we'll have a little bit of flexibility. I also want to say that I will be leaving this evening at 20 to 7 if we're not finished, and at that time I will turn the meeting over to Councillor Columbus to finish. I have a granddaughter in grade 8 that is graduating tonight, and also Councillor Wells will be leaving at 6:30 just before me if we're not finished, as his granddaughter is graduating from grade 8 as well. And I've been told by someone that I dare not miss that event. So that's where I will be. Just before we get to the agenda, I would also like to just turn things over to our clerk, Mr. Grizel, to talk for a second about next week's agenda. As you know, Monday is July 2nd, but it is a holiday, and the offices will be shut down. And he will tell you how thick the agenda is next week, and perhaps this council may come to a consensus as to a very early start next week. It's that time of year before summer break. Andy, I'll let you conduct this to see if we can get an earlier start next Tuesday.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, looking at the potential agenda for next week, there's probably a good 8 to 9 hours of work to be done. And we also have a Board of Health that's probably going to need some time within that. So it is a very large agenda. One thing that council may want to consider is starting as early at 9 o'clock in the morning and trying to get through a daytime meeting. It's an unusual circumstance, but because we have the only one more council meeting before the summer break, we don't want to push too many things back. And as members of the Bylaw Appeals Committee know, on the council meeting date of July 10th, we can't start more than an hour early because we have a bylaw appeals meeting already scheduled for 1 o'clock that day. So we don't have much flexibility with extending council the following week of July 10th.
We are dealing with one staff report tonight. How many approximately would be on that agenda next week, Andy?
Well, I think we're between 35 and 40 staff reports right now.
Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, if you're looking for a motion,
I'm looking for direction.
I would certainly give direction that we begin at 9 o'clock.
At 9 a.m.?
That is correct.
Next Tuesday. Do I have a seconder? Wells and Brunton. Discussion. In favor? Opposed? 9 a.m. next Tuesday morning it is, and maybe we can get the entire agenda out of the way as it is our last CIC meeting. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare, and if so, the nature thereof? Councillor Columbus, please.
Yes, Your Worship. Declare a conflict of interest with respect to the deputations in Councillor Height's motion. I am a property owner whereby the tenants pay their own water bills, and I've been speaking with the lawyer. I was told that I can have a perceived conflict of interest, so I will declare.
Thank you. That is noted. Anyone else? It's been moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Height that the agenda be approved as presented. Those in favor? Carried, thank you. We'll proceed with the agenda as it is before us. We'll go to item 6, deputations. Our first deputation is George Santos. This is concerning water arrears, and I'll ask Mr. Santos to come to the microphone. I'd like to remind our deputations that they are 10 minutes in length. They cannot be extended. I will remind you at the 9-minute point, you have a minute left to wrap up. We always ask George and others that you be as concise as possible. And at the end of your deputation, if you would just remain there, there may be questions. 10 minutes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Your Worship, councillors, staff, the audience, media. Good afternoon to everyone. The reason I'm here, Mr. Worship and councillors, of course, is regards to this water and sewer and tenants' arrears. I'll be very sincere. I believe that this is a ludicrous motion, and I'm not in favor of this motion that's been tabled. Over the last 2 weeks, I've fielded over 68 calls with regards to this motion. And I say to myself, geez, I'm not even a councillor here, and I'm getting all these calls. But as a landlord owning a number of properties, the concern that I have is this. It's a slippery slope, and it's a smelly one. And owning a number of properties and knowing that having something like this in place, one, it's not just. Two, it comes down to the fact of responsibility and accountability. Where do we start? Where do we finish? The question here today is water and sewer. A month from now, 2 months from now, it's going to be hydro, or possibly Bell Canada, or cable. I don't know. My point here today is this. The reason I'm here, I'm representing landlords and landladies that have contacted me. So my concern is, why? I understand there's $100,000 missing from the kitty, and we're all taxpayers. We're all business people, and the people that aren't business people are taxpayers. Municipally, provincially, federally, we all pay into this. So why should tenants get a free ride? And this is the concern that I have. Now, if you have 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, I have property that have 4 meters. I know of individuals that own one property with 8 tenants that have 1 meter, 1 sewer, where I have a meter per unit. And the bill averages from 80 to 90. Now, I'll let everyone know, my mother turned 90 on Saturday. Now, she still lives in her own home. She has dementia. We're celebrating her 90th birthday, and one of my tenants stopped and said, "Hey, Mr. Santos, good afternoon, how you doing? I can't wait till Wednesday." And I says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, guess what? Instead of drinking Laker beer, I'm going to be drinking Corona, because you're going to be paying my water and sewer bill." And I looked at him, and I was flabbergasted. And then I said to myself, who in their right mind came up with this motion? And then I understand it was Councillor Noel Height. And I said to myself, why? Now, in the past, I know that Haldimand County has talked about this and put this in place. I own property in Haldimand County, and guess what? I sold it. This happened in Hamilton. I sold the property. I've invested my sweat, all my golden eggs here in Norfolk County, and everybody that is around this table owns something in Norfolk County. My point here is the individuals that are here are concerned, like I am. So the question here is, there's a vote today, which way it's going to be swayed. I hope it's defeated. It's an election year, but more importantly, we're all taxpayers. And if we keep allowing this to happen, they're going to have a free ride. And I want you to understand the word free. Mr. Noel Height, November the 11th, people died for democracy. There's no freedom. There's freedom, but it wasn't free. And to allow tenants and landlords to pay for their water and sewer is just wrong. I feel it's unjust, and all I'm asking here today is for justice. I think tenants should be accountable, just like we, the landlord and taxpayers, are accountable to the people. And more importantly, it's important that we understand that at the end of the day, it's a teamwork. Now, some of these tenants that I have, they might have mental health, they might have certain issues, but they're stupid like a fox. And that case of Saturday is a true story, and that bothers me. So then my mother in Portuguese says, "What did he say?" And I translated it, and she looked at me and she says, "Son, that's wrong." I says, "Mom, it is, but unfortunately, this is what's taking place." So, Your Worship, councillors, I'm here today to basically just give you a clear understanding of why I'm here. I'm very concerned, and if we open this Pandora box, what's next? Thank you, Mr. Chair, Worship, and councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. Are there any questions for Mr. Santos? Councillor Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Thanks, George, for your presentation. Just a very quick question. Have you ever had trouble in the past with tenants and, non-payment of bills, whatever they may be?
Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Brunton, the answer is yes. I'm just like everyone else.
Right.
I've had tenants where, unfortunately, they haven't paid their hydro, and guess what? The hydro's turned off. It's that simple.
Right.
Water and sewer, if it's not paid, it's not my deal.
Right.
But it's our deal as a taxpayer.
Yeah. Have you, I do know a bit about the Landlord-Tenant Act. I guess my question is have you found it difficult to evict tenants that don't pay their bills?
Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Brunton, at the end of the day, the Landlord and Tenant Act becomes more of a tenant act than it does a landlord act. I've had tenants, unfortunately, that haven't paid their rent, but that's the nature of doing business.
Right.
But what I found is, going to the Landlord and Tenant Board, many people refer to it as a kangaroo court, but it is what it is. A lot of tenants haven't paid their rent, but there's due process.
Right.
And I will follow through to the letter of the law to even get that $100 or $110 owing on principle. And this is truly what it comes down to, Councillor Brunton. It's principle. And this Pandora box can't be opened. Not in Norfolk County. I don't care about Haldeman.
Right.
I don't care about Hamilton. I mean, we're all a part of this together. We're one piece. But here in Norfolk County, we're different.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the deputation? Thank you very much, Mr. Santos. You can be seated. It's been moved by Councillor Wells.
Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Height that the deputation of George Santos respecting Councillor Height's motion regarding water arrears be received as information. Discussion. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I hope Councillor Columbus didn't go home. Is he here? Okay. He'll be back when we finish the motion. Okay. Mr. Leonard Patterson is our next deputation. If he would come forward, please. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. You're where you have 10 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. To the chair, councillors, administration staff, and members of the public. This presentation is given in support of the motion put forward by Councillor Height regarding tenant water arrears charges. Let's look at the background that has created this issue. In 2001, the then standing version of the Municipal Act was revised and updated, taking parts of the Public Utility Act and making the Municipal Act of 2001. The new act contained many changes, but one section water ratepayers are interested in allows municipalities to add utility arrears incurred by the tenant to the tax bill of the property owner. Simply stated, the act deems the property owner to be the consumer. The Municipal Act of 2001 reversed law. Let me repeat that. The Municipal Act of 2001 reversed law, made by court decisions in the 1990s, which supported the position that it was not reasonable to hold a landlord responsible for unpaid utility where the landlord was not the consumer. Additionally, in January 2011, the province of Ontario informed the Federation of Rental Housing Providers of Ontario that no action would be taken to change the 2001 legislation. So the history of this issue shows the province of Ontario, through the Municipal Act, deems the property owner to be the consumer of water and wastewater services since January 1st, 2003. Please refer to the agenda package for copies of water and wastewater arrear policies from the City of Hamilton and the County of Brant. These documents are just two examples of implemented policy based on the updated changes to the Municipal Act. The County of Brant document is straightforward, listing the Act and the regulation sections and how they work. The City of Hamilton is a more comprehensive document. On page 2 of that document, a table outlines the timelines for notices and action type if payment is not forthcoming. This is public information available via simple internet search. Now let's talk about the money that is involved in this matter. In the staff report dated May 16, 2017, the statement, and I quote, "Since 2011, the water and wastewater write-offs averaged in excess of $100,000 annually." So let's do some math. 2011 to 2018, 8 years, times 100 is $800,000. But if we consider the period 2004 to 2010, and even if the estimated average write-offs were lowered to 60% of the 2017 report, that's 7 years times $60,000, $420,000. That is an estimated accumulated total of $1.2 million that has been overcharged as a landlord subsidy to the water system ratepayers of this county over 15 years. If like annual losses were happening in the private sector, strong steps would have been taken to rectify the situation. Furthermore, if a private sector corporation executive had legislation at their disposal to reduce losses, I can assure you it would have been implemented in 2003. But Norfolk County is not in the private sector. Some initiatives have been put in place to try and reduce losses. Control lists of names of past write-offs, a more detailed application, the use of a collection agencies, just to name a few. All these are window dressing, leaving our administration staff wasting their time trying to control an uncontrollable situation. Administration staff can control the losses but require the right policy to be in place to do it properly. Therefore, the question must be asked, why is Norfolk County Water and Wastewater not using standing legislation to stop ongoing financial losses? Simple answer, this council is the reason. You, a majority of our own policymakers, outright blocked the recommendation of administration staff to adopt the Municipal Act in February and May of 2017. You have also ignored the fact that many other jurisdictions in the province have acted in the best interests of their ratepayers while you have not. To be blunt, this is a complete failure of this and previous councils to meet the fiduciary duties that are expected of our elected officials on this issue. It shows an inability to change and adapt to a new reality. You are still locked in the 1990s. Those days are over. The money, the $1.2 million plus previously identified, is gone, never to be returned. Many ratepayers will chew on this fact for a long time. However, this financial injustice can only be remedied by looking forward. The water and wastewater system runs on a net zero concept. A true 100% cost recovery policy must be put in place to properly collect costs from the right source. And I want to repeat that. Properly collect costs from the right sources. To clarify, all property owners must, excuse me, all property owners must be treated equally as consumers of water and wastewater services, and all property owners will and must support the operation of our water system. Landlord property owners attached to the water and wastewater system cannot be an exception any longer. The unpaid tenant water account subsidy financed by general ratepayers must end. The administration staff report dated May 16, 2017, listed 4 options to address the tenant water account arrears. Option 4 was the Municipal Act solution that should have been adopted at that time. The other 3 options were not acceptable a year ago, and that stands the same today. In conclusion, after 15 years of missed opportunities, this council needs to start the bylaw process today to implement the appropriate sections of the Municipal Act and end the financial inequality now in place. Give fairness, equity to general water system ratepayers. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson, for that. Are there any questions from council to the deputation? Councillor Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke, and thank you for your presentation. A couple of quick questions. You ever been a landlord?
No.
You ever been a tenant for a landlord?
Yes.
And you had no problems?
Nope.
Paid your bills?
Had to pay your bills. You are obligated to pay the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson, for your deputation. It's been moved by Councillor Wall, seconded by Councillor Height, that the deputation of Leonard Patterson respecting Councillor Height's motion regarding water arrears be received as information. Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Now, I have in my hand the proposed motion from Councillor Height, and I have a mover, Councillor Height. I do not have a seconder yet, but this motion states, and I'll just read the, therefore be it resolved, that council approve adding tenant arrears for water, wastewater charges to the tax roll of the owner of the property to which the water, wastewater service was supplied. I have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Geisens. I have a mover and seconder. The motion is on the floor. Discussion. Councillor Black.
Well, I have to say that I agree with George Santos completely. And I have to say that Norfolk County can't have it both ways. You know, they have approved this situation forever. They allow single meters to be put in to apartment buildings. So if there's 4 apartments, Norfolk County has allowed 4 meters to go into that apartment building. So now we have a motion that says you can't do that. So we've duped landlords into thinking this is a good way to separate all of the utilities, make the renter, the tenant responsible for the hydro, the water, the sewer, the gas, or whatever it may be. And then the rest of it is up to the landlord who collects the rent. That's applied to taxes and whatever else, insurance, and so on and so forth. So I think that Norfolk County, by doing this, or if they were to support this, is having their cake and eat it too. Having meters put in, allowing the meters So if this motion is supported, what Norfolk County should be doing is going around and saying, anybody who has any building that has more than one water and sewer meter or water meter must remove that now, and there'll only be one meter, and it'll be in the name of the landlord. But that's not the way it is. So, and the one deputation said that the law, the statute said that they deem the landlord as the consumer of that water. In fact, they did not consume that water. That tenant consumed the water. So, and I agree with Mr. Santos when he says, what's next? So if a landlord has individual hydrometers, so does that mean now the tenant doesn't pay the hydrometer? Now the default goes to the landlord. Same with gas. Same with the telephone. Same with cable. That's just not right. It's not fair. No matter what legislation allows us, and it's not legislation, it only gives us the authority to do that. It is not the law. So it's not fair, it's not equitable, and I think I had another point if I can find it. My computer went. Okay, and in terms of Norfolk County, water and sewer, the department is a department. It is like its own business. And they do have a collection aspect to it, like any other business. That is the way they should deal with this. Twofold. First of all, they should have a stringent application form that screens the individuals to make sure that they have the ability to pay, that they are responsible individuals. So the application, a stringent application, and a program for collection.
Thank you. Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. First off, I'd like to start by addressing some of the landlord's concerns that I've received. I know that the Landlord and Tenant Act is one of the worst ever and takes away owners' rights to their own properties completely. It is completely geared to the tenant. I get that part of it. It's broken. It's not a municipal thing. I would suggest you contact your MPP because it is a beast of the province and it is an unwieldy beast. And it is broken and does need to be fixed. But that's not what we're here to discuss today. Okay? Should this motion pass, I would hope that our staff would host a public meeting to address other concerns and how this would be phased in. There will be a lot of work that goes into this, and the public does need to be involved in the process. Being a landlord is a for-profit business. With every business venture, there is a risk. You mitigate that risk by selecting good tenants. That is your vetting process. You check their references, you do your credit checks. So it's a calculated risk. Just if you were a reseller of Grumple Grommets and extended net 30 terms to all of your clients, would you not check their references and their credit? Absolutely you would, because otherwise you would lose that money. And then who would bail you out? No one. You know that's the risk you take in business. If you have a vacant apartment, you're not making income on that month, and no one bails you out. If your tenant, who's your responsibility, doesn't pay their water and wastewater bill, the other ratepayers do bail you out in our current system. They absorb those costs. Our water and wastewater rates are based on the cost to provide the service to all the customers. It has been brought to this council's attention that delinquent tenants are shortchanging the system to the tune of approximately $100,000 per year. This shortfall must be covered by other users because all costs must be borne by the users. Norfolk County already has one of the highest water and wastewater bills in the province already. $100,000 doesn't seem like much, but at this term of council, that's $400,000 that's been paid for by the other ratepayers. It's the price of a brand new home in this county. Okay? Our property tax unit is very similar to this, except if you don't pay your taxes, it is not passed on to the other payers. Norfolk County will sell your home out from under you and put you on the street. We don't ask our other taxpayers to bail you out. Should we allow people to decide whether they pay their taxes or not? I don't think that we would function very well that way. Should responsible taxpayers cover the cost of delinquency? No. So why is it being allowed for water and wastewater? We've all heard the arguments about how to deal with multi-dwelling units with only 1 meter. We have capable staff that will need to find a way to deal with that. It's not our job. Our job is to see that our water and wastewater customers are treated fairly. Cambridge, Toronto, Kawartha, Brantford, Barrie, Peel, Ottawa, Waterloo, Thunder Bay. That's just to name a few of the other municipalities that already have this in place. Why do they have it and that we don't? The city of Kawartha made this change in 2011 after losing $22,437. That's a far cry from our $100,000. What are we waiting for? Since our figures are so much higher, I suspect we either have people that have figured out the system or we have some commercial accounts bilking the system. In 2003, the City of London had to change their policy because they were losing $240,000 per year. That's the City of London. Norfolk County's losing $100,000. We're way smaller than that. All right, we need to stop that bleed. There will need to be issues as to when to notify the landlord the bill is behind and a form to fill out, but it's all part of the process. Collections will still be ongoing, and maybe when the fees are recovered, they can go back to the property owner. Maybe the need for deposits for tenants with no previous history will have to be set in place, and I certainly hope that identification will be required before being able to even open an account. The landlord will need to know quickly if the bill is behind so they can mitigate the risk. That will have to be something that our billing agent looks after. In closing, this is the right thing to do. Fair and equitable treatment for our water and wastewater customers. Norfolk County would be negligent not to collect 100 cents on the dollar when we have every opportunity to do so. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I call for a recorded vote.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I certainly listened to the deputations and to both of my colleagues. My recollection when we dealt with this last summer, while we didn't choose to implement the measure of charging the landlord for the tenant's arrears, I do recall we did implement a couple of new measures to try and assist the process, which included, I think, a couple of the things that Councillor Height mentioned in terms of credit checks for new customers, et cetera, et cetera. Am I correct in remembering that, Mr. Mayor, or to staff? And I know this would be perhaps Lee's department or James, but I don't think we just simply stuck our heads in the sand. I think we directed at least some additional measures to try and reduce the problem, as I recall.
Any comments, Mr. Johnson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Oliver. The measures as far as credit checks, I don't believe we did institute that, but we did look at the application-based, and I believe from a legal point of view, every piece of information that we could ask for was being asked for by Earth. I would have to double check that because that was last year, but that was my recollection.
And is the idea of a credit check for a new account application something we could do legally, should we decide to do?
Council may recall, I'd been here about a month at that point in time when this came up, and you went in closed session to receive some legal advice from my office on that question. So I can't get into right now what that advice was. Nevertheless, you could either turn your minds back to that, it's more than a year ago now, or in the alternative, we can provide you with a future legal report. Our county solicitor is sitting here, and he's nodding in the positive, but you were given some specific advice on that specific issue.
Any other discussion on the motion? Councillor Broughton, please.
Thanks, Mayor Luke. Just very quickly, I recall some of that, Councillor Oliver, and you know, I don't understand where you get a driver's license, you get your photograph taken. Get a health card, you get your photograph taken. You know, if we got a problem and we need more information on our application, let's send a letter off to our MPP and get some answers. Maybe they could change some of this stuff and improve it. I agree with Mr. Santos. The act is written in favor of the tenant. Plain and simple. I've heard that from many landlords. So I sympathize with Councillor Height. You know, we're an $18 million business, the Water and Sewer Department. We lose $100,000, I don't know, is that bad? As long as we are vigilant in trying to collect it, that's the important thing. And if we can gather more information on tenants, let's do it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Clerk, do you want to conduct the recorded vote, please?
Councillor Height.
Yes.
Councillor Geisens. No. Councillor Oliver.
No.
Councillor Black. No. Councillor Brunton. No. Councillor Wells.
No.
Councillor Sonnenberg. No. Mayor Luke.
No.
The motion fails.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. Council, I'll ask you now, please, turn to page 77 of your agenda. This is our one staff report this afternoon. It's PW 18-39. This is the award of contract PWE 18-39 for the Meisner Dam rehabilitation. As you know, this was deferred from 1 week ago this afternoon. We had the staff report given. No, it was not given last week. Was it given last week? I thought we deferred it, but we didn't.
Through the Mayor to Council, I presented it last week, but I can certainly present it again if Council wishes.
What you wish, Council. I know, yeah, I think it was short and sweet last week.
I presented it last week and advised that further to that report, we'd also received the letter from the Ministry of the Environment,
Yes.
and I had recommended that it be deferred until I had the opportunity to obtain more information. Council will recall that we also sent an email after we had discussions with the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, and they advised that based on the new information that we'd provided, they felt that we'd satisfied their requirements in that letter. And I'd be happy to answer any additional questions this evening.
Thank you very much, and certainly I am going to entertain any additional questions over and above last week, and then see where we go from there. So I'm going to open it this is for questions. There's no motion yet on the floor to debate. Questions? Councillor Black first, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Luke. And looking at the report, and the question is, it's on page 77, and the paragraph that starts off, this project may only proceed upon receipt of required approvals, and down a little bit further. At report time of writing, LRIA, the Lakes and Rivers Improvement Act, approval has not yet been received. So the question is, have we received it yet? And what are the implications of not receiving it? And do you expect to receive it?
Through the Mayor to Council, we understand that it is it's going to be provided in very short order. We have applied for it. We are under no impressions, we have no reason to believe that we're not going to be receiving the permit in a very short period of time. The contract is clear that it states that the contractor cannot start until the approvals are all received. So by council proceeding with the award, it doesn't affect the award of the contract.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Luke. One of the questions I had, and I'm trying to get a more accurate answer on the money we have spent to date on this particular project, and I've had a lot of information provided to me over the last week or two, and it says in the report, and I'm on page 79 of the report, and it says studies to date, engineering, testing, etc., $330,000. Well, I've been provided with some chronological events going back to about 2009, and some of the costs are in there, and they would appear to far exceed $330,000. So I'm really somewhat confused as to where we're at financially on this project, but I've asked Mr. Johnson to provide me with some details, and I'm certainly not hanging him out to dry, but he's indicated to me that they don't have any information back to 2009 that's accurate. And I guess that baffles me because, you know, we spent $800,000 on a computer program for the finance department, and we can't figure out what the costs are to date. I'm somewhat disappointed, but I guess we'll have to, I guess I'm not going to get that information today, so it makes it very hard to make a decision. Thank you.
Lee Robinson, you have an idea roughly of what we spent to date from the start?
Through the mayor to council, I don't have the total cost to date. It, as you're likely aware, it definitely predates my time with the municipality. I can address the costs that are showing here. The $330,000 that is being referred to in this report is effectively since this capital project was undertaken. So this is the cost since council decided to proceed in this direction and instructed staff to head in this direction. That's that $330,000. There was a considerable amount of money spent sort of to get us to the point where this decision was made to proceed in this manner. So the costs, Councillor Brunton, that you may be seeing would have been historical costs that were expended by the municipality far in advance of a decision being made to proceed with that. I have access to those historical numbers, but again, the $330,000 that's included here is simply the money that we've spent in the last few years since council has decided to proceed in this fashion.
So then you don't have the figures prior to that either. You said in the last few years, so I'm assuming the figures before that, you're not aware of them.
Through the mayor to council, I'm not aware of that. I believe that we could that Public Works could certainly work with finance and put those numbers together for council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. In the report, the original engineer had, I guess, made some errors once the second engineering firm, Stantec, went in and looked up stuff. I remember some of the errors were the timber pilings or suspected timber pilings, and that the earth berms, they were relatively weak, and Stantec's disproven that. I'm wondering, during all of this research, have we ever looked for the actual costs on a real working version of this dam?
Through the mayor to council, I'm struggling a little bit. The dam works, it holds back water. I believe what you're referring to is actually being able to adjust the levels with respect to the water.
That's correct.
If that is the case, the MNRF has been very clear with staff that they are not going to permit us to do that on a going forward basis. When we brought forward all of these reports to council, we did advise council at that time that we're not able to proceed with that. Council advised us to proceed with this, so we did not pursue any costing with respect to those other repairs because we've been advised that the ministry wouldn't permit them.
And what was the reasons for that?
Why the ministry wouldn't permit them? There is a direction that is coming from the ministry that all effectively man-made lakes, creek or ponds, etc., should be returned to their natural state, which would mean removing the dam and putting it back into a creek. And that's the mandate that the ministry is working under. I can't speak to why they came up with that mandate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Columbus, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Robinson, I believe this has been 9 years in the making where we come to this report, and do you expect any roadblocks or hiccups coming forward from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry or Ministry of Environment and Climate Change?
Through the mayor to council, we believe that we've addressed all of the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change issues as well as all of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry issues.
Any other ministries that could get involved here?
I believe we've spoken to all of them at this point, including DFO. We even reached out to federal agencies to make sure that we've talked to everybody because that was the direction that we've received from council.
Okay, thank you.
Other discussion? Questions. Councillor Sonnenberg?
Thank you. I understand part of the project is to bolt the dam to bedrock. Is that right?
Through the mayor to council, I wouldn't use the term bolt, but to attach, yes.
Okay, you're going to drive something down through the dam into the bedrock.
That is correct.
Do we know how We know how far the dam sticks out of the water. How far does the cement structure go below the surface of the stream?
It does not go very far below the surface. That is the problem.
4 feet, 6 feet?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's not significant.
Okay. So we're gonna drill into this structure and down into the bedrock, and we don't even know how deep it is.
Through the mayor to council, we know how far it is to get down to the bedrock. I just don't know the number off the top of my head for how much,
Okay.
the depth, how much of the existing dam is actually below the surface of the
Okay, how
ground
far
surface.
down is bedrock?
It varies in that location, but it's between 5 and 7 meters.
Is there any chance that we are going to compromise the stability of the structure by drilling holes through it?
Through the mayor, no, we are not.
You're sure of that?
I'm sure of that.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Well, I'm going to read the resolution. It's printed on page 77 of your agenda. Then I will ask if there's a mover seconder so we can put it on the floor. The resolution in front of you is that the report 1839, award of contract Meisner Dam rehabilitation be received as information, and that a bylaw be prepared authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute a contract upon receipt of regulatory approvals with the firm of Rankin Construction for contract PWE 1853 in the amount of $1,499,756 excluding taxes, and further that the approved 28 capital budget be amended as outlined within this report. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wells, and do I have a seconder? Councillor Height, thank you. Discussion on this resolution. Councillor Wells, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, as you heard, we've been dealing with this issue now for 8 years. I think it's time that we do something besides talk. And before I present my case, I'd just like to thank Marian Gadsby, who's the lady who's sitting over there, for all the work that she has put into this project and for the emails that she has sent and so on and so forth. Thank you very much. And I'll be using the information she provided to each of us. Only mine will be the briefer version. Basically, do nothing is not an option. The dam is unstable and it needs attention. That's pretty simple. Removing all the stop logs and repairing the dam is not an option because that's going to create flooding. So we're between a rock and a hard place. Do nothing is not an option. Do something is what we have to do. So it reduces us to either yes or no. If you vote yes to repairing the dam, we know the cost is to be $2.1 million. We know that. Voting yes will be using all the information that we have now and the expertise for which we paid. Voting no to repairing the dam is a vote to remove the dam and not using the knowledge that we paid for. That doesn't make sense. You go to a doctor, you get expertise, and surely you would listen to your doctor. With all the expertise that we have been provided with, surely we should listen to that as well. If we vote no to repairing the dam, we will have to pay for several more new studies, full environmental assessment before we can remove the dam. Probably, and this is only a guess, a full environmental assessment will cost considerably more than fixing the dam. I will be voting yes to repairing the dam and bringing Silver Lake back to its former glory. I would ask you to vote yes as well. We've been waiting, the community has been waiting a long time. The community of Fort Dover has said this is an asset and we would like it repaired, and we are counting on you to do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Black, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Luke. And the issue of Meisner Dam did arise back in 2009 or so as a result of safety concerns and safety of people and property. Consequences of a failed provincial dam were more acute with the then recent failure of the Normandale Dam. That's how this came about. Council at the time, in their wisdom, decided to repair Meisner Dam and subsequently set aside $1.1 million. The normal democratic process of asking staff to review all options was ignored, going directly to the option of repair. No consideration was given, allowed, explored, or assessed to alternate methods to assure the safety of people and property. If a comprehensive staff report were asked for, those options for review would have been do nothing, explore the option of repair, explore the option of decommissioning. Council then tried in vain to determine the ownership of the dam, and at great cost were not able to, but were able to determine that Norfolk County clearly did not own the dam, and their interest was solely for the safety of people and property, and not aesthetics. The original owners were the Meisner family, henceforth the naming of the dam. The main question is, what is the long-term environmentally right thing to do? Trends across the province are to decommission dams that provide no flood control function, such as Meisner. The only purpose of to repair it is for the subjective view only. 2 dams in the county were removed because they had no flood control function, Sutton and Brook dams, and not without a lot of public input. Both LPRCA and County Council approved a plan, decommissioning them as the environmentally correct option to proceed with. Returning the river above Meisner Dam back to its original cold water stream was never explored. Council went directly to repair, turning the area into a parkland setting, capitalizing on developing fish habitat were never explored. Silting concerns and options to mitigate this possibility were never explored, and yet we know after investigation the silt in this man-made reservoir is contaminated. Allowing the dam to be repaired increases the risk of contaminants to migrate downstream into the lake to cause more problems with our fishery and drinking water. Allowing the area to return to its original natural function will keep those contaminants from moving and causing costly damage. Dredging the man-made reservoir would be an environmental catastrophe and bankrupt whoever was performing this unmanageable financial burden. Options to deal with the silt have not been explored, and we have not been allowed to consider expert information regarding silting. MNRF will only allow repairs that will limit the amount of water that can be retained in the man-made reservoir. It will never go back to its original height and depth. It will be shallow and lead to algae blooms. Council has already received complaints, as was predicted, about the foul odor created by these blooms. They will negatively affect the water quality downstream in the lake water where Dover gets its drinking water from. As a decision maker, I've never been given all the information needed to make the best decision possible to serve the greater societal and long-term good. Because we have not considered expert advice on siltation mitigation techniques, the public and decision makers merely speculate wildly that the sky is falling with no solid advice based on facts and science. Norfolk County Environmental Advisory Committee has recommended Council complete an environmental impact statement. I'm not in favor of spending over $2 million of Norfolk County taxpayer money to complete repairs that do not serve the best long-term interest of society. I am in favor of exploring the option of decommissioning the dam and returning the area to its original cold water stream function, including the development of a public park setting, and I'm willing to allocate tax dollars for that purpose. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion, Councillor Sonnenberg?
When this structure was built 150 years ago, a lake was formed. At that particular day, the water that dam held back was at its maximum. The next day, after the dam was commissioned, there was less water in the lake. Because silt comes down the stream, stays in the bed of the lake, displacing water that goes over the dam. Every day, there is less water in the lake. Every day, there is less pressure on the dam. Can anybody argue with that fact? If there's less water in the lake, there's less pressure on the dam, and there's less water every day. There's less water in the lake this very second than when I got to my feet to speak about it. It's continuously filling with silt. So the pictures provided last week showed the lake was practically 3/4 filled with silt. So the dam is doing less work. It's been there for 150 years, has not moved, solid as the Rock of Gibraltar, and now we're going to drill holes in it to fasten it to bedrock. It's not hardly doing anything anymore. It does not make sense. There is less water in the lake every day, less pressure on the dam. The dam does not need to be reinforced. The only thing I would support that the report brings forward is removing the old bridge. It's unsightly, it's rusty, it's not a pleasant thing to look at. Let's get rid of that. Leave the dam alone. I am told that we're not going to be able to raise the level of the water in the lake. It's going to stay the same. It's going to be still the slimiest, dirtiest, stinkiest body of water in Ontario. We should put a sign on the 401 saying, take 24 south to T2C Technicolor pond scum, which is what we have. I think there's toxins in that lake that science can't even identify. And we're going to preserve it. We're going to hold it back and let it grow. It's ridiculous. Remove the dam. Let all that scum and filth go out to the lake, over the falls, down the St. Lawrence, and into the river and dissipate. That's the only way we're ever going to deal with this slimy mess. Combination of scum and goose manure and stench, and we're going to preserve it. It just boggles my mind. Thank you.
Councillor Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I will not babble on too long. I'll just give you my interpretation of what I've been able to understand on the background of this project. And I did receive a lot of information over the last 2 weeks, and it's a tough one. And I appreciate what the people in Port Dover that live around the lake, what they want. However, I read the Stantec report again, that 160-page document that I forget what we paid for. It was a lot of money, but that's why I asked the question earlier, how much we spent on this, because that report in itself was a lot of money, and a lot of work went into it. And if you read that report, and I'm of the opinion that Black Creek is more of a concern to the Dover Basin than the Lynn River and everything back of the dam. If you read it in detail and understand the 1,000-year flood and the probable, I think the word is probable flood that might happen. I guess it's a PDF or PFD, whatever. But I read all this information, and I found it very difficult when I came to about, in the chronological order of things, I came into about 2011 in there when Council asked for research on the ownership of the dam. And it came back that, and I didn't realize this, but not only the dam was not owned by the county, but Silver Lake is not the responsibility of the county. That was very obvious in the information I received. I don't want to dwell too long on the project. There's been a lot said about it. I just have a very, very difficult time asking the taxpayers of the county to put out another $2 million, $2.1 million, to do some